So yeah, folks, in part one, I spoke about the transformation, the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. And yes, as we come out of this cocoon, we have our wings. We've released some of the chains that we held ourselves dear to, our identity that is no longer there. We are reborn to something new. And yes, this is where we have a whole new perspective. We see a bigger picture that maybe we didn't see before, just as the caterpillar never had the bigger picture. Now the butterfly rises above and sees this ginormous garden. It sees a much bigger scenario. And this is where, if you talk to astronauts, they have something that happens to them. It's called the overview effect. And what happens to them is when they go into space, they look at planet Earth and they just lose this identity that they had on Earth. They actually feel they become somebody new through this raised level of awareness where they see the interconnectedness of everything. They no longer see, and you can ask them, and there's a great YouTube on it. It's called the overview effect. Please go onto YouTube and check it out. But what they realize is, there's no more need for borders. What is needed is less conflict and more unity between the people on Earth, especially for our beautiful planet. And this overview effect is really a massive shift in perception. Now, in our personal lives, when we go through this transformation and we shift and gain a new perspective, we're also experiencing our version of an overview effect. And without a new perspective, it is very hard to start learning how to forgive. Without a new perspective, it is very hard to find gratitude. Without a new perspective, it is very hard to start mending relationships where they were required, or to start developing new relationships and to start life in a new frame of mind. And I feel this perspective is one of the key fundamental aspects of leadership. Leadership without a higher perspective, without the overview effect, means that we are stuck in that ego sense of being a leader, where it's all about the power and what's in it for me. Whereas when you're a leader with this overview effect, you're starting to become more of a servant leadership. And we've seen those types of leaders who've made great changes in this world. We're talking about Martin Luther King. We're talking about Madiba. We're talking about Gandhi, where it was more about uniting people rather than dividing people. And this was a result of their overview effect. In order for them to go through this process, they had to let go of who they once were. And yes, as they transformed into this new person, they could bring this new skill of perception into uniting people. And I feel this is so important for everyday leaders out there. Whether you're in a community, a company, whether you're a leader in your community, your company, or your country, it is about seeing the bigger picture and working with this. And I feel truly, it can only really happen once you've been through that personal transformation, maybe even through that dark night of the soul. So yes, for you as a person watching this right now, maybe you've been through this and you are this leader, because as you gain a perspective, you become a leader within your family. You start in your community, your company, and your country. And I feel for a lot of folk who have been through it or are going through it, you can feel very much alone, especially when we look at what's happening in the world, where we are getting very ego-based leaders who are more about dividing than uniting. Well, I feel this is where we step into the next macrocosm, so to speak, where we are now the imaginal cells within this giant system. And yes, whilst we may feel alone and pretty dormant, not feeling like we can really affect any change, I feel it's not about losing heart, because what does happen is you'll find the community of these imaginal cells, these imaginal leaders coming together and forming their groups. And as we do, what we do is we form enough of a structure that it becomes the tipping point where change is made. We've already seen that happening around us. Look at the awareness around plastic and how that's formed its own agent of change. We see it in communities, we see it even in companies, and yes, even indeed countries, where there's been this tipping point. So yeah, folks, be aware. Notice around you. You might have you as an imaginal cell, might notice some other folk around you who are also imaginal cells. And I feel that's why we get together with these vlogs, why there's so much that through social media, for example, the TED Talks, there are incredible people out there who are coming together and making the change. And that's where I say to you as well, don't lose heart, be the change. And yes, folks, who knows, you might be a vital part in terms of something that could shift in your environment. And yes, well, as for the riddle, what does the astronaut know, which the caterpillar asked Alice? Well, I'm going to leave that up to you, for you to decide for yourself. It's all a matter of perspective. Until we chat again, folks, take care and stay aware.